Happy Friday to you, July the 28th. I got to give a shout out right away, Eric, because it is my anniversary. So I got to give a shout out to my significant other. 5 years of putting up with me. That's a long time putting up with me. So anybody deserves
that is a long time, dude.
A medal, lots of awards. That was the best winning ticket that I have ever made and the best winning decision that I have ever made. Deciding to let her put up with me. That was great. Eric, you and I are going to try to pick some winners today. And what's great about wagering and the way that we wager on the winning ticket, which is presented by DRF Sportsbook, you and I like to play big prices. We don't play a whole lot of chalk. And that's good because through the first few weeks, I have been struggling overall. If you were looking at the winning percentages, it would not be good for me. But what was nice last week, one horse I liked, Go Rocket Ride, who was 9-2 on the morning line, floated all the way up in the Haskell and went off at 12-1 and won. And now a lot of losers are taken care of with that 12-1 winner. That's what's nice when you play big prices like that.
When you get a big price like that, your ROI just is a lot easier to get over that break-even point. So that was good. That was a nice hit for you, man.
We encourage all of you who are in the state of Iowa to sign up for an account right now and to get involved. Let your friends know, your family members know. Anyone in the state of Iowa, sign up for a DRF Sportsbook account and use our promo code that's flashing across the bottom of the screen, FAST150. It'll give you a $150 deposit match bonus. So, Eric, we are going to talk about a couple baseball games for tonight for Friday night. We're also going to talk about some Saturday plays. I've got a couple horse racing plays. You're going to be talking some NASCAR, right? NASCAR, I believe, and
UFC.
So we're going to get you all over the place, and then we'll finish up this edition of the Winning Ticket previewing the AFC West. So this will actually be our fourth AFC team by team preview for the division. We'll finish up the AFC, and then next week we'll move on to the NFC. Shout out to our buddy Jax Fitzpatrick, who's our producer. He's out hanging out Outer Banks, chilling at the Outer Banks right now. I know the show on Netflix, which is fantastic. I love anything that's like set in the high school college setting. Just sign me up. I love that world. Give me the fish out of water, guy from the wrong side of the tracks, something like that. I love it. And that's where producer Jack is today, hanging out. So
I've never seen an episode. Never watched it in my life.
Got to flip that on. Outer Banks. Okay, Eric, let's talk baseball for tonight. I have two baseball plays. You have two baseball plays. Yes. And you know what's great about the first play that we have? We can talk about it together because it is a very similar play. I'm playing Tigers first 5 innings plus 116. You're playing Tigers on the full game plus 130. We both like the Tigers. I just went to the first 5 because I want to really try to capitalize on the starting pitcher matchup, mainly because Garrett has been struggling lately, and that's who I wanted to attack. Through the month of July, 18 1/3 innings pitched. He has a 7.85 ERA. In those 18 innings, he's given up 16 earned runs, 26 hits, 5 home runs, and then 3 more hit batters. He has a 7.85 ERA and a 3.25 batting average against. Honestly, that was my main target here, trying to target Garrett. I was looking for a team total for the Tigers. I was having a harder time finding that, so I figured let's play the first 5. I think the Tiger starter's been in much, much better form lately, and I'll pass the baton off to you because you have the same side in this game. Talk to us a little bit about why you like the Tigers here.
I look at it, as you mentioned, Garrett, for the month of July, ERA of 7.85, but let's just look post All-Star game. That ERA has ballooned to 12.5 in 7 2/3 innings pitch. Olson on the flip side for the Tigers, the rookie, 4.15 ERA for this month. He just had one bad start against the Padres where he only gave up 5 runs. You take that out, his ERA drops to 2.23.
And as bad as the Padres have been, they are still a team that has a good lineup and some good bats in the lineup, and they're still capable of scoring runs, and they're a tough lineup to navigate.
Yeah. You mentioned Marlins offense. Even though they're 4th in the league in batting average, they're 26th in runs scored, meaning they're getting on base, but they're not getting anyone home. De La Cruz has been really struggling this month, only batting .231 with 11 RBIs. I think Olson's going to be able to handle this lineup. I think the Tigers will be able to get to Garrett. And if you just look at the Tigers' ROI on the money line after a loss, they are positive for the year. They're one of the better teams to bet after a loss. So I bet the Tigers here plus the 130.
Tigers plus the 130 for Eric. I'm going to take them in the first 5 plus the 116. So we're both leaning on the Tigers. We're both attacking Garrett today. That's our first play for baseball for tonight. My second play for tonight, Eric, and make sure that game starts soon, right? In just about 20 minutes.
6:40, excuse me.
So make sure to get that wager in right away because that one starts before we even hit 7 o'clock Eastern time. Second game for me tonight, Eric. I have 2 baseball plays tonight. I'm going to go Miami, Atlanta over the 10 for my next play. So the last 6 games for Chirinos, he's only had 2 starts. And in those 2 starts, he gave up 5 runs and 8 runs. Overall, in his 6 games, his last 6 games, in his last 24 innings, he has a 6.66 ERA. That's literally terrifying. That's scary as hell. 6.66, 340 batting average against, 34 hits given up, 18 earned runs, 7 home runs in his last 6 games. And then Hauser, who has been pitching well for Milwaukee, I pointed this out before. He just faced Atlanta in his last start, and Atlanta is one of the better offenses in the league. So you just faced those guys last time a week, not even a week ago. They're familiar with you now. It's almost like when you face a pitcher like the 3rd time through their lineup, and a lot of times that's when starting pitchers struggle because guys can now square up a little bit. They know what the pitcher's offering. I think this Braves team is going to be ready for a starting pitcher they just saw 5 days ago. So I'm going to go over. I think both of these teams score. I'm going over the 10 tonight in this one. So over 10 for me. Eric, what about you for your next baseball play for tonight?
My next one, I'm going to the late game out on the West Coast. I'm taking the Red Sox here plus the 120. Let's look at it for the last week. The Red Sox have the best batting average in Major League Baseball, batting .336, averaging 6.5 runs per game. Flip side, the last week, the Giants have the worst batting average, batting .187, averaging 2.6 runs per game. Webb looked awful his last game out against the Nationals, only lasted 1 1/3 inning, gave up 6. ERA was 40.5. Red Sox hit righties well, second best batting average on the season, 10th best on base percentage, and the 5th best slugging percentage. Giants have the worst on base percentage since the All-Star game. I have a hot team versus a cold team. I'm getting plus money with the Red Sox. I'm going to keep fading the Giants while I can. I'm going to take the Red Sox here plus the 120.
Eric's got the Red Sox for his second play. So we both have 2 baseball plays for tonight. For Eric and I, we're both going to be leaning on the Tigers early on. Eric's second play will be the Red Sox. And then for me, I'm going to go over in that Milwaukee-Atlanta game tonight. I think both starters could be in for a tough one. So lots of runs there for me. Red Sox for Eric, and then we're both on the Tigers tonight. Let's look ahead to the weekend, Eric. Lots of racing. I'm going to talk horse racing. You are going to talk NASCAR and UFC. So first up, let's talk a little UFC with you. Tell us who you're looking at in one of the fights this weekend.
This one breaks my heart because I'm a Tony Ferguson guy, but we've seen this time and time again when guys get to that age where they just need to hang it up. Aging fighter, Tony has lost 5 in a row, and Father Time is catching up to him. And one thing, like, you look at when you see these fighters that are on a losing streak, okay, let's look at their rounds. Are they at least winning rounds? So that way, does something like fluky happen? Did they get caught with an elbow, caught in a submission? He has lost 15 of his last 17 UFC rounds.
So there's nothing fluky about that. You're just getting beat.
About
it's
that.
It's not different matchups, different fighters, different styles. He's just getting beat.
He's just getting beat. His last win versus a fighter on the active roster, 2016. Last win over a fighter on the active roster. He just changed teams because he said his team wasn't giving him the best opportunity to win. They were holding him back. They were being negative. He's been acting really weird in the press conference. He pulled a knife out when he was talking the other day in the press conference. I think he's done here. Tony's only path to winning is if he's able to get Bobby Green on the ground. Green is fast enough and slick enough with his fighting style, not allow that to happen. He's fast. He's strong. Tony's chin has been weakening over time. I think Bobby is able to put him out. Plus 180. Look, Green hasn't had a submission win since 2013, so I doubt he's going to get the submission win. If you guys are worried about Green possibly pulling out submission, you can get him to win by KO, TKO, or submission at plus 130. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm just going to play the KO, TKO price at the plus 180 because we've seen this time and time. Aging fighter going in, weak chin. I think Tony, as much as it breaks my heart, gets KO'd.
Bobby Green to win, TKO, KO, plus 180 is the number for Eric there. We go from UFC to Saturday at Saratoga, race number 6. I'm going to go to the outside, Eric. The number 12 North End Lady is 12-1 on the morning line. She's going to be making her 3rd career start. And in her 2nd start, she actually tried the grass for the first time. She ran really well that day. She was a little bit slow. She kind of moved up from the outside. The leader ran off. She made a big bid up to within a length and she faded. What I liked is when she made her move, she looked like she was done and she was just going to back up, but she kept trying. She kept battling even after she was tired. Now they're going to put the blinkers on. I think it'll give her a little bit more focus for a horse who ran in spots. Again, when we're playing these big prices, this is a horse who's 12-1 on the morning line. My value line is like 8-1 for her. So if I can get anything in the 8-1 range or above, I think that's worthy of making a win wager on the number 12 North End Lady at Saratoga. I'll get you over to Del Mar in a second, but Eric is going to get you first to a race, right? We're going to play a matchup in the race.
Yeah, the one thing about NASCAR is, look, you can go top 10s, top 5s, top 3s to win. Generally, like I said last week, is I kind of make a list of drivers I like, drivers I don't like, pace based on current form, historic style at the track, historic style at the track type. 2 guys that fit that category were Kevin Harvick and William Byron. In 10 career starts here at this track, Byron only has 2 top 10s. 2 weeks ago, I get New Hampshire in this track that runs very similar to Richmond. He finished 24th. Flip side, let's look at Harvick. Harvick's last 10 races here at Richmond, just one finish outside the top 10. Last 20, he only has 5 finishes outside the top 10. This is Harvick's one of his better tracks. 6th best average finish at this track, 7.8, compared to Byron's 14.2 average finish. You look at Harvick, recent form, back-to-back races where he finished top 5, fourth in each race, finished 4th at New Hampshire, very comparable to the way this track is going to run. And then we look at Byron, last race, 14th, as I mentioned, in New Hampshire, 24th. Hot driver, cold driver, track type, everything just makes sense to me to take Harvick, basically a pick 'em over William Byron.
That's something that reminds me of horse racing, because if you've ever seen the movie Let It Ride, that's like one of the great horse racing movies out there. There's one scene where the horse is named Lord Byron. He said, I want to bet Lord Byron, and he gets arrested. He can't bet Lord Byron, and he ends up winning because the horse, I think, ends up losing and runs second. So it ends up helping for him. Byron is similar. We don't want Byron here. We have Harvick in this matchup. For you horse racing fans, let's head over to Del Mar for Saturday for my second play for Saturday. And again, Eric, we can go price shopping and looking for a big price. This horse is another 12-1 shot on the morning line. This is at Del Mar on Saturday in race number 7. I'm looking at the Flying Pharaoh. This is a horse whose connections, they're just sort of trying to figure out where he fits. You can tell, and I say she's a 5-year-old mare. You can tell she's has ability, and she's been in tougher spots, and she's faced good company throughout her career. But what's happened, it's like a good athlete that has had a tough time staying healthy. It seems like every time she has a race or two, she gets hurt or she's off for a little while. And it's just hard to build up your fitness level. It's hard to build up your stamina and really develop. Now she's going to make her second start off of a year layoff. She's grown up a lot. She's going to make the second start for her new connections. And she had a little bit of trouble last time out. I think her race was better than it looks on paper. The number 1, the Flying Pharaoh, is 12-1 on the morning line in the 7th race at Del Mar on Saturday. So a couple of big prices for you. One at Saratoga, one at Del Mar. Eric has a play for you at UFC. He has a play for you in a head-to-head matchup in NASCAR. And Eric, we will now head to the AFC. Anything else you want to mention for Friday or for the weekend before we look ahead?
Tigers game starts in about 15 minutes, so make sure to try to get that one in soon.
Yep, if you're looking to play some Friday night baseball, get that wager in right now. I went Tigers first 5 innings at around plus 116. Eric went for the full game at about double that, at around plus 130 in that range. So try to find the best value that you can. If you can find maybe any sort of team totals for the Tigers, I wouldn't mind those either. We were attacking the starting pitcher for Miami, who's been struggling a lot lately in the month of July, Garrett. So that was a look at tonight, a look at tomorrow. Now we move to the future, and we're actually going to finish up our AFC team previews with the AFC West and the Super Bowl champs, your returning Super Bowl champs from last year. So, Eric, let's start right off the bat with the Chiefs as I pull up the divisional odds, and I'll pull them up on DRF Sportsbook. Talk to us about the Chiefs, who are your favorite. And in this particular division, is at least the way the odds are set up, it's a little bit different than some of the other divisions that we've talked about before, because there is a definite first choice, second choice, third choice, longest shot in the field. We have the Chiefs, right? Yep. No doubt pecking order in this division. Now, will it play out that way? Who knows? But as far as if you're looking to bet it, this division is one of the more simple, kind of basic, where everybody stands out.
Correct. There's definitely the heavy favorite with the Chiefs. You have the Chargers, Broncos, up and comers. Everyone's down on the Raiders. I saw something weird on Twitter saying expect a story to come out that Davante Adams is going to want to be traded. So there's already and you have the Josh Jacobs stuff going on in Oakland. You have a defense that really doesn't match the way they want to play in the back four. But we'll get to that. Obviously the Chiefs. The thing that stood out to me with the Chiefs is they were the first team that started doing the analytics. This happened where they just kind of came out of nowhere with Alex Smith as the quarterback. Matt Nagy is coming in to be the OC. Let's not kid ourselves. This is an Andy Reid offense. He's going to be the one calling the shots. Mahomes is Mahomes. The offensive line is adding 2 new tackles in Jawan Taylor and Donovan Smith. They're not as good as the tackles that they had there last year. So the interior of the line is going to be a lot stronger. Still going to be one of the better units in the league, but it's not going to be as good as last year's unit. Pacheco suffered a shoulder injury. I'm always a little leery about running backs with shoulder injuries just because of the wear and tear that part of the body takes with guys constantly swatting at the ball. So I'm going to be voiding him in fantasy. McKinnon is here. He's always going to be a factor. I'm really not that high, though, on CEH. I really think he's going to be if the guys are hurt, maybe, but he's
not a between the tackles guy.
He's not.
Yeah, he's not durable enough. He's a piece. He's a nice weapon to have in certain spots, right? In a one-game situation, he's a nice guy to have on your roster. But if you're someone who's building like a fantasy team, or you're thinking about season-long props or something like that, he's not really a difference maker.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Next, Travis Kelce had a 23% target share here last season. And my worry is he's getting up in age, 34 now. If he takes a step back, who's going to be the lead dog? I know he's listed as a tight end, but when you look at his split,
he's the number one wide receiver
at 65% in the slot last year.
He's the number one wide receiver.
You know what I mean? So he's basically a wide receiver. He's listed as a tight end.
Because what's the pecking order after him, Eric? We've got Sky Moore. We've got Tony, who is always hurt, tons of talent, tons of ability, but he has a tough time staying out on the field. You've got Valdez-Scantling. That's their top 3 wide receivers. Yep. And for as much as, Juju Smith-Schuster and Mecole Hardman aren't like number 1 types, they're solid and sort of safe, right? Juju is probably like a number 2, but Juju is definitely more proven than anyone in this room this year.
Yep.
So that's 135 abandoned targets for them. I think you and I talked about this Chiefs team a little bit yesterday. It's not that I think they're going to be bad. I don't think because you have a guy like Mahomes, like if he's healthy, your floor is still pretty high. But what has happened now is a lot of the teams around them have improved. And I think this year, their offensive line, we have some questions, right? Because they lost 2 tackles in free agency. And now they're going to bring in 2 new pieces to an offensive line. That's always tricky. So you look at the offense, you start from the front there. The running backs, we've already had questions about the running backs. We're not exactly sure. Wide receivers, we think they're going to be less than they were last year because you've got Kelsey and then a group of wide receivers that aren't quite as proven. So probably a little bit less there. So now all of a sudden your offensive line's a little bit down, your running backs are maybe a little bit down, and your wide receivers are maybe a little bit down. And now Mahomes has played 5 straight AFC championship games.
Yeah.
And that those start to add up to like a whole nother season of hits pretty soon when you do it 6, 7, 8 years in a row. Then on the defensive side, we're concerned with them too, right, Eric? Don't forget they lost their offensive coordinator, Bieniemy, who's been a big part of what they've done for a while. So yes, they have Mahomes, they have Reed, but it's just one of those comfortable pieces to the operation that's no longer there. Defensive side, they had a great pressure last year. Chris Jones led all interior defensive linemen with 15.5 sacks, 29 quarterback hits, but they don't have as much depth up front. They lean on a lot of the young guys. They've drafted 6 players in the first 2 rounds since 2020 on the defensive side. I think they're going to be okay. I just don't think this team has the same margin for error as they have when they've been dominant. And I think they're going to come back to life a little bit this year and kind of come back to the pack. I know you do too.
I agree 100%. When you just look at it, you mentioned their defense. The big thing with their defense is they are losing Frank Clark. What does that mean? That means everyone's going to be focusing their attention on Chris Jones. BTW, who's not in camp right now because he's upset with his contract. Chris Jones. Those are the 2 best guys on the defense. And right now they're not there. That is an absolute huge blow. And if Jones does come back, when let's face it, he's going to be back. They are going to work something out to get him in. If the player from Purdue that they drafted, George Karlaftis, if he can't take that step forward, they're just going to be constantly doubling.
Because there was not as much pressure on him last year, right?
They don't have to worry about him.
Last year, you already had those 2 guys there. Yeah. There wasn't as much pressure on these younger guys. They didn't have as much focus on them, right? The offensive linemen weren't as worried about them. They were worried about taking the other guys out, neutralizing them. That left things a lot more wide open for a guy like Karlaftis.
And the thing is, they blitzed at the 5th highest rate last year. If they can't create pressure with the blitz, just because everyone's doubling Jones, they're going to make this secondary, which is young and still has a lot of question in my eyes. I think it's going to exploit them. So my worries are their defense, the losing offensive linemen, them banged up with how far they've gone.
Yep. Just like 5 or 6 little things, right? There's not like one huge thing that you look at and you're like, oh, that's the reason why they're just not going to be great.
And there's one team I am insanely high on in this division. And hypothetically, let's say they win it. We've talked about how good the AFC is. So we think about, we got the Chargers, Broncos, Chiefs. You have the Browns, Ravens, Steelers, Bengals,
Bills, Dolphins,
I mean, think of all
Jets.
Those teams. So, and you're only going to be battling for what? 3 playoff spots. So I think there's value right now on the Chiefs at plus 360 not to make the playoffs.
Because, and it's not, and again, we're not, and this isn't like Eric saying that the Chiefs go 6-11, right? What he's saying is there could be a chance that they win 10 games and don't make the playoffs. Like they could be right in the mix with everybody else. And there just could be a real log jam of teams that have 9, 10, 11 wins right in that range. And you went not to make the playoffs at plus 360. For me, I just went with the under of 11.5. That's a high number, man. That's 12 wins. That is a really massive number. And when you look through their schedule a little bit, you know, they've got a bizarre schedule. They have 2 Thursday games, 3 Monday games, and a Germany game in week 9.
Yeah.
So their whole schedule is not going to be consistent, right? What a football team does, they've got every week, if they play on Sunday, they know what their routine is. When they practice, when they go through the game plan, what their run through, what they do with pads, and then they do film, they know. But when your weeks are constantly changing, all of that gets interrupted. You don't get the same flow. And I know they've got Mahomes and they've got Reed and they're well run, but you know, that's a lot going on there. A bunch of primetime games. And then they've got a rematch with the Jags, the team that they beat in the playoffs last year, the Bengals, who have been one of their big rivals, who they beat in the playoffs last year, the Bills, who they've had some big games with over the last few years, and the Eagles, who they beat in the Super Bowl. All four of those teams are going to have a massive chip on their shoulder trying to beat the Chiefs. You're the team that's the Super Bowl champ from last year, where everybody is going to try to beat you and get up for you every time you come in. Again, I don't think they're a 7-win team, but I think, could they be 10 and one or two things go wrong and all of a sudden you're a 9-win team and there's a bunch of other teams right around you? I think that's where you and I are kind of both seeing that there's a possibility that could happen. And there's so much value in going against the grain with a team like the Chiefs, because everybody wants to go over Mahomes totals, points, the Chiefs to win. You always get great value when you go against a team like this.
When you go against the grain, swerve when everyone is going straight. I think there's, like you said, I think there's great value on it. I think the Chiefs are going to take a little bit of a step backwards this year just because of how well they've done the last couple of seasons.
And because we're gambling, right? We're talking about value. Eric and I were discussing this the other day. We don't get to praise Mahomes probably as much as I would like to, because a lot of times when you're on these gambling shows, you're not talking about betting the heavy favorite. So what's the point in me telling you all these great things about Patrick Mahomes that you all already know? But I think there are some times where I see stats and I don't even realize. It's kind of like what I feel like when with LeBron, sometimes when you're watching him, like, I want to stop sometimes and really appreciate how good this guy is. I don't think we realize sometimes how good he is. He's the first player in NFL history to win multiple MVPs, multiple Super Bowl MVPs within a 5-year span. Only Tom Brady and Joe Montana have ever done that in their entire careers. He's the first player ever to lead the league in passing yards, passing touchdowns, win the MVP, and win the Super Bowl MVP in the same season. Only 3 other players in history have ever done all of those things in a career. Mahomes did it in 1 year. Yep. Brady, Manning, and Kurt Warner were the only ones to accomplish all of those things throughout an entire career. They've had 10-plus wins in 5 consecutive seasons. What's crazy, they could win 10 again, and we could still go under. They could win 10 again, and Eric could still have them miss the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
That could absolutely happen. He's the only player since 1950 with a better than 500 winning percentage in games when his team has trailed by 10-plus points, including the playoffs, which is just nuts. When his team is allowed 28 points or more, he's 17-13. So if you have an amazing game and you score 30 points, he's still going to beat you more times than not. They played in 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls. They've won 2. They have hosted 5 straight AFC championship games. Patrick Mahomes, has never played a true road playoff game in his career. The only games he's played away from home in the playoffs were in the Super Bowl. That's just
absurd, which is just absolutely
for 5 years.
Absurd.
5 years. The Chiefs, can they do it again? They're the team to beat, but because they are a little overvalued. I'm going under the 11.5. Eric is going not to make the playoffs, and that's a nice one at plus 360 there. Anything else you want to mention about the Chiefs, buddy?
I would just be very leery about Tony, just because we've seen him historically.
It's not a talent thing with him. If he's on the field healthy with them, he'll be super productive. They'll dump it off to him. He'll get used a lot. He just may not be. I don't want to trust him in a fantasy situation. I have a hard time drafting him this year.
The person he reminds me of the most, this is old school, Percy Harvin. Just someone constantly always there, always
expecting, and he's capable of making a big play. Minnesota, Seattle, but just hurt. Yep. When he's out there, you're paying attention to him. He does draw attention. He does all of the things you want a football player to do when he's on the field. Yep. You just worry that he may not be able to stay on the field. It's hard to count on him, right? He's a player that's like an icing on the cake player. When he's there, It's wow. But when you got to count on him as like a number 1, number 2 wide receiver,
he's just not there.
Yeah, it's tough to depend on. Eric, let's move to the Los Angeles Chargers. Their over-under this year is 9.5 as we keep talking about the AFC West. Thanks so much for hanging out with us on The Winning Ticket, presented by DRF Sportsbook. If you're in the state of Iowa, sign up right now for a DRF Sportsbook account and use the promo code FAST150. You'll get a $150 deposit match bonus. So, Eric, they were 6-6 last year. Then they win 4 in a row and they get in the playoffs. They're up 27-0 late in the second quarter. They end up losing. They were the first team in the NFL to lead by 25 or more points in the playoffs and lose. They were also the first team to lose a playoff game with a turnover differential of +5 or more. They did sign Herbert to a 5-year, $262 million deal. He set an NFL record, 102 touchdowns in his first 3 years. He averages 287.5 career passing yards per game, which is second all-time in history, behind only Patrick Mahomes. But now he's got to start getting some wins. They bring in Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. And what we were just talking about with Percy Harvin, Eric, we could basically say that for the Chargers and for the defense of the Chargers, right? Tons of talent. And if Bosa and James and Jackson and Mack and these guys are healthy and they're out on the field, this is going to be a good football team.
Yeah.
If those players are healthy and playing, and then if they have Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, there were only 4 games last year when those two wide receivers played 50% of the offensive snaps. They were 4-0 in those games. It sounds simple, but with this team, it's just been about their health. And what's funny, because even when they've been missing a lot of these guys, they still have been in games and should have won a lot more games than they have the last few years. Like, they've spit a lot of games out, even with these injuries, even with a lot of these guys missing. Bosa has only played 12 games or more 3 times out of 7 years in his career.
Yep. You look at them, and I want to start, people like offense. I always start with offense when I do this stuff. So obviously the big thing is they got rid of Joe Lombardi. They brought in Kellen Moore to be the offensive coordinator. Moore likes to push it down the field. Lombardi likes to use the running back more in the passing game. Just looking at it, I looked at Pro Football Reference when I compared the two coordinators. Moore's passing game, running backs were getting 4 less targets per game, 3 less receptions per game, and 25 less yards per game. With all that being said, I'm obviously fading Austin Eckler. I want to find Austin Eckler receiving props. That is what I'm looking to fade. None of them are posted yet. As soon as I find some of those, I'm going to be all in on those. In terms of the wide receiver room, look, I know Keenan Allen is 33, but he led them in targets per game. Not for the season because he missed multiple games, but on a per game based, he led them in there. Also, we need to remember they have Mike Williams. Mike Williams is a big guy on the outside. I've been a huge fan of Mike Williams ever since the day he was at Clemson. He just can't stay healthy. Now you're bringing also in Johnston from TCU, so you got a good 3-headed monster receiving core. 2 guys that can vertically stretch the field, in Johnston and Williams, Allen working underneath. Exactly what Kellen Moore is going to look for, but the offensive line needs to stay healthy. When Slater stayed healthy, only 3 games, very highly graded left tackle. Now, when he was out, Saley had to shift over from left guard to left tackle. That made everyone playing out of position. If Slater can stay healthy, him on the left side, next to Slayer, Lindsey is Lindsey in the middle, best center in the game. And then you also have Johnson, who looked good out of BC. And then you have Pipkins, who's serviceable at the right tackle. This is a very good offensive line, potential to be 10 or 11.
They're just really talented all overall. Like they don't have, they remind me when you look at their unit, they remind me, or just their overall roster, they remind me a lot of the Browns. Like they just don't have a lot of weaknesses when you go through. Just are these guys going to stay healthy and are they going to produce at their top level? Yeah. Because the best of what they've shown, this could be a really, really good team. We do this with the Chargers a lot, though, where we think they're going to take the next step and they haven't. But now they've got really, there's like no excuses anymore. You've got the quarterback right. You've got him locked up. You even drafted another receiver. You've got the receivers you need now. You got your back for another year. You mentioned the offensive line should be better. The defense should be healthier. And for me, I think the most important thing, I think Brandon Staley is just going to be able to get out of his own head a little bit and focus on being the head coach, maybe handle the defense a little bit, because now Kellen Moore can just deal with the offense.
Yeah, Kellen Moore is just going to deal with the offense, be the guy when to go and not go. You mentioned the defense and the health. That's all I need to do. If I were to tell you last season that the Chargers were going to finish 15th in sacks last season after they added Mac, you would tell me I was crazy, but Bosa could not stay on the field. You factor in that they struggle stopping the run. I think this year they're going to be a little bit better. Darwin James, if he can stay healthy, he's going to play in the box more to go against the run. JC Jackson, hopefully he can get healthy. He plays healthy. Great cornerback. This team has Super Bowl potential written all over it, but they've underperformed so much. It is hard for me to trust laying a future on them.
The Chargers have 6 primetime night games, and they also have an early bye. So it's a little bit of a funky schedule, but I think they're going to be good. Like, I think they'll be right there in the mix. I think they're a double-digit win team. Like, I think they're in the 10-11 win range. And, again, I'm not going to give a lot of these AFC team monster win numbers because I do think the AFC is going to be very competitive overall. I think, 3 of the divisions seem like they're strong, and the one that doesn't seem as strong, I think it will actually be a more competitive division than people think, right? The one we talked about last week, the South, where a lot of people are just sort of checking the Jags in. I actually think from top to bottom, that'll be more competitive than the other 3 divisions. You could honestly tell me any of those 3 divisions could have 3 playoff teams.
Yeah.
The AFC East, the AFC North, or this division could possibly even have 3 playoff teams as we move from the Chargers to the Broncos. And Eric, you, my friend, are going to be driving the Russ bus this year for the Denver Broncos. The number now that we're seeing is 600, but you can probably get even bigger. And Eric did get a bigger number a little earlier, like a week or so ago at around plus 700. So that's the first number there. Also, the wins going to roll over the 8.5, which I like that play too. I'm also playing the over 8.5. I think that's a very fair number. And then he even threw a big one in on the Broncos to win the Super Bowl, plus 5,000. So let's roll into this team, Eric. Sean Payton comes in, and last year, their head coach, who had them 4-11 to start, was one of the worst head coaches and one of the worst as far as preparing an NFL team that I've ever seen. It was unbelievable how it didn't look like the players knew the plays. It didn't look like there was any chemistry at all between the quarterback and the head coach. It didn't look like there was any trust between players and coaches at all.
It looked like a shit show.
It was. No, it was. Everything, it was as bad as possible. And I will say, I don't think Sean Payton is like some magic Mr. Fix-It necessarily. Like, I wouldn't say he's the greatest football coach of all time, but I honestly think anyone at all would be a massive upgrade over what they had last year. And a guy like Sean Payton is very good fixing your offense, right? He hasn't won a bunch of Super Bowls. He's won one. He's gotten you sort of to the playoffs, and he'll get you there. And I think that's what he can do with this team. Do I know if they will go and win a Super Bowl? And do I trust them against some of the best teams in the league in a one-game situation? Not yet. I have to see it. But do I think this team will be way, way better than last year? Yes. He's just not going to take Russ's crap. Like, he's not going to let Russ be about Russ. This is going to be about winning games for the Broncos and what's best for the Broncos. And so he's going to call plays, and those plays are going to be run, or they're going to figure out a way to run it that Russ is comfortable with. It's not going to be like, oh, I'm not doing that. And you could see that body language last year. It wasn't very good. I think Russ sort of came in. He thought he was the big star, the savior that was going to come right on in, and everyone was going to love him. And it couldn't have been worse. He's got to be a little bit humbled after what happened last year, right, Eric?
Yeah, and they have an adult in the room. Payton got rid of the parking spots, the private workout facility, like everything Wilson had, he just got rid of. Payton is the adult in the room. Now, look, anyone that's listened to me come on your thing knows that I absolutely despise Sean Payton for what he did. I thought he should have won more games in New Orleans, not more games, excuse me, won a Super Bowl with the teams that they had in New Orleans instead of one. Took a year away. I think he's going to be a little bit more energized. And look, when you look at it, the Broncos have good players. When you look at week nine, if they would have scored 19 more points, that was their differential. They were just losing games in the weirdest possible way. And at the end of the day, that just came down to coaching. This team is going to be improved. They added McGinty from San Francisco.
Offensive line help.
The offensive line for the right tackle and left guard positions. Plus, they have two young interior linemen I think are going to take a step forward. Also,
their playmakers are awesome. Like their playmakers are awesome, Eric. Like their wide receivers room and their running backs between Williams and then what they have with Hamler, with Sutton, with Dulcich now. Tim Patrick's going to be back. Judy. They also drafted Mims from Oklahoma. That's a lot of solid weapons out there, right? And Dulcich taking a step forward.
And then you have Javonte Williams, my guy, not on the physically unable to perform list, which I think is really big for his leg. I think he's someone that's going to win the fantasy football title just because of Payton's history of using the running back in the passing game and just centering the offense around them. My worry is I don't know who's going to play the Michael Thomas role. If I had to guess, I think it's going to be Judy because he out-targeted Sutton when Wilson was a quarterback, more versatile wide receiver, better route runner. Sutton is a big, more physical guy, more of the outside type of a wide receiver. Then you have KJ Hamler, home run hitter, field stretcher. Marvin Mims, I really don't know what to expect from him just because I don't know where he's going to be in the pecking order. And you have Tim Patrick, who's shown he's very capable when he gets run. So this is a very talented wide receiver core. Like as you were saying, defensively, I really don't like the hire of Van Joseph. They're going to play the wide nine, but I like their defense.
It's weird too. He was their head coach.
Yeah.
He was the former head coach 4 years. I know these guys are adults and it's different. It just seems a little bit weird. Like I was the head. Now I'm back as the assistant. I'm the defensive coordinator, right?
A little bit of the stuff. But, like I said, he's adult. He's a professional.
And he was a guy that he just reminds me more of like a Fangio type too. He's a coordinator, right? Yeah, now his scheme may not always be perfect for the personnel. Like that's sort of what you're talking about. But he's a good coordinator, not as much as a head coach.
Correct. They added Frank Clark to form the Chiefs to pair with Randy Gregory. You have a good pass rushing tandem. Then you have Jones, Allen, and Purcell up front to start the run. Very good defensive line up front. Their DBs will have pressure to play man-to-man. But when you look at who they have, Moss, Mathis, Surtain, these guys are all good in man-to-man coverage. Plus, I think they're going to be able to get to the quarterback more with their defensive line. I think this defense is very good. I think the offensive line is good. And if anyone watching this, there's kind of a theme to what I'm doing. Teams that invest in their offensive line are teams I'm looking to have futures on and invest in. I like what the Broncos did. Like Gino said, I played the over 8.5 at plus 106. You got them to win it at plus 700. And I put a little bit on for them to win the Super Bowl at 50-1.
You got to build from the ground up, right? You got to build from the floor, and you got those. If those lines aren't good, in particular the offensive line, you may be able to get away with it if you have a good secondary and like a good linebacker crew, and maybe you don't put a ton of pressure on. But you can't have a bad. We've seen it. We've seen the Chiefs. We've seen it happen with the Chiefs. We've seen it happen with some of these teams in the last few years. You have a bad offensive line, you're just not. You're done. You're not going to get all the way. There's only a certain point you can make it to because you're going to find a team that you just won't be able to get through. So, and what's nice about when teams invest in their offensive line, it's less splashy. People don't know the names, right, as much, or the gamblers don't see a McGlinchey as a big a deal as a quarterback that they might know, or a wide receivers that they might know that somebody else. Whereas these offensive linemen are equally as important. And Eric, you know what? Where you're seeing it with the money, right?
Yeah.
How these guys are starting to get paid now. Even if you don't know their names, they're getting paid like they're huge parts of the team. They're getting paid way more than the running back.
Like they are a big part.
Yep. Denver, Eric is all in. He's driving the Russ bus over 8.5 wins to win the AFC West at plus 700, win the Super Bowl at plus 5,000. I also went over the 8.5 wins with Eric. Anything else you want to mention about the Broncos?
What did he say? Let's ride.
Let's ride. Let's ride.
Let's ride.
Eric is driving the Russ bus this year. Yeah, I've got him 9-10 in that range. Let's move to the Raiders. Their over-under is 6.5 wins, and the Raiders are the longest shot in the division here at plus around 1,500. Eric, for the Raiders, they're going to bring in Jimmy G, and we have some question marks about his health, his durability, but he's been a winner, 38-17 as a starter, and he knows McDaniels. They're familiar with each other from his time in New England, as is Jakobi Meyers, who they brought in. He has 700 plus receiving yards the last couple years. You're going to point out, though, that the fit is a little bit weird for like where he's going to be compared to some of their other personnel. The offense, I don't really worry about their offense. They were fine. It's the defense that's really struggled. They were 26 in points allowed last year and 2 years ago. Crosby was the only player that had more than 5 sacks. They needed more from Chandler Jones. They did use a draft pick on Wilson out of Texas Tech, so that should help them. But their schedule worries me a little bit. Back-to-back road games, 3 of their first 4 on the road. And at cornerback, they are going to be starting and playing a couple players that have never been full-time starters. They just signed Marcus Peters, but he had a torn ACL back in 2021, and he only had 1 interception for the Raiders last year. I think defensively, they'll probably be improved. They can't really be worse. I think it's just a tough division for them. And I don't have a whole lot of reason to feel like I want to go running to bet over on the Raiders at 6.5. I don't know if they're going to be a 3-win team, but that probably feels pretty accurate, like right in that 6.5-ish range. My one play, Eric, for the Raiders, I'm going Adams under 1,250.5 receiving yards. That's a big number. That's 1,251 receiving yards. He did have an awesome year last year, and he set the season. He had over 1,500 yards. He led the league with 14 touchdown catches, and it was a single-season Raiders record. But now you bring in Jakobi Meyers. You also have Renfrow back. You also add a tight end, Meyer, who maybe he takes a while, and I don't even know how much targets he's going to get, but just perhaps another weapon there. And we don't really know how him and Jimmy G are going to react. We don't know the chemistry there at all. Adams actually had previously played with Carr. Those guys were friends. They knew each other from college. So I actually think there was Carr really wanting to make sure Adams was getting used a lot. And there was 1 or 2 games last year where they didn't use him at all. And then a few games where they would just force feed Adams over and over. I think this is a high number, and I'm a little bit worried, if Jimmy G gets hurt. He's missed 30 regular season games over the last 5 years. Then we're going to be dealing with the backup quarterback situation. Is he going to be getting peppered and having 100-yard games in that sense? I don't know. So this one for me, Eric, was my play for the Raiders. I'm going under Adams on the receiving yards.
Let's just kind of look at it. And Jimmy G doesn't throw the ball on the field. Everything's going to be shorter. So I absolutely love this play. I think Adams, I'll be honest, I would not take Davante Adams in fantasy football with how high he's being drafted. Get him in the second round. Yeah, I get it. But Jimmy G as your quarterback who doesn't throw it down the field, that has me a little bit leery. Josh Jacobs, with Josh Jacobs not there, how is that going to affect everything? We don't know. He's not at camp. He left camp because he wants to get paid. Word on the street is they offered him $12 million. That's more than Saquon Barkley, and he still said no. I don't know about that.
I don't like the schedule either. I said 2 of the first 3 on the road, or they have 2 road games to start. 3 of the first 4 on the road. They host New England, which is kind of a weird game because of their coaching staffs and all the familiarity there. They have 5 primetime night games.
Yeah.
It's the Raiders team. And they have 3 Monday Night Football games.
Well, so, I mean, it's the Raiders.
And it's the stadium. It's a new stadium, and it's Vegas, and they like showing it. And for as much as their own win total this year is only 6.5, people, they still have a huge fan base. They do. People watch and they tune in and they care to talk about them positively, negatively. The Raiders over under 6.5. I'm going Adams under 1250.5 receiving yards. Anything else you want to mention about these Raiders?
Up front, they're going to be elite up front with what they have with the pass rushing, as you mentioned, Chandler Jones, Max Crosby, all those guys. That is an elite pass rushing unit. I like it a lot. Defensively, their back 4, they really don't mix with how the DC wants to play. They don't mix. So I'm a little bit worried about that. Michael Mayer, the thing with him that we need to remember is, and we can see it with Kyle Pitts, is these these tight ends, they tend to struggle coming in to a new offense, to the NFL, because of all the blocking stuff they have to do, all the assignments they have to pick up. I'm out on this team, but I am a little worried because per Pythagorean win total, this is going to be the team that should take the biggest step forward.
And that makes me nervous because I agree with you. In watching them, there were a lot of games the last couple of years they should have won that they spit out.
Yeah.
Like they were in a lot of games where like weird bounces went against them, weird things happen. I have a hard time placing them ahead of any of the 3 teams in front of them in the division. And that's like, and the AFC overall is going to be more competitive. Like, I think if Jimmy G's healthy, this team could be better than they were last year as a team, right? Like overall, they could have less holes and less weak spots overall. But is that going to result in more wins on the field? Like, it doesn't always work that way, right?
No, and this offense, it's just going to be different. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know. That's what you feel different.
It
wasn't worse. It's not going to be better or worse. It was just different, right? What the guy says to the girl, was it better than me? Was it worse than me? Well, no, it was just different. Oh, don't say that, right? You don't say that one. That's sort of what you feel like with the Raiders here, because you don't know, like so much of it comes down to Jimmy G. If he comes in and he can give them like a consistency and maybe just be, 85% of what he was in San Francisco, they'll be fine. That'll give them a nice floor. That'll give them a good floor. But if he is a little bit banged up, or maybe for Jimmy G, his life was made so much easier by Kittle and Debo and all the bells and whistles in the running game, right? And all the Shanahan stuff. That could be a thing too, right? Jimmy G could have definitely been helped out a lot by his situation and where he was there. So one of the more intriguing teams this year, because I just don't know. I don't expect them to be a Super Bowl contender, but on paper, they look like they have made some nice improvements in some spots. It'll really all come down to, again, McDaniels for me, Eric, like with you with the offensive lines. Yeah. How good is this guy? Because last year, this was a coach who lost to a Jeff Saturday-led Indianapolis Colts team when he came right in and had no preparation. Like, they lost that game. That's one of those that I'll always have such a hard time forgetting that the Raiders lost that game. But they
was embarrassing.
That was pathetic. And we talked about Hackett, from Saturday, from Urban Meyer a few years ago. We have seen some awful football, some terrible professional football teams and preparation. We finish up with the AFC West preview, and we finish up with our AFC previews. So next week, we will dive on into the NFC. Thanks so much for hanging out with us again on The Winning Ticket. Shout out to our buddy Jack Fitzpatrick. Hope he has a nice time on vacation there, getting a nice tan over on the Outer Banks. Eric and I will be back next week to talk more baseball with you, more horse racing, more NASCAR, more UFC, and we'll start our NFL team-by-team previews on the NFC. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Remember, if you're in the state of Iowa, DRF Sportsbook, go right now, sign up for an account, use the promo code FAST150. We'll see you back here next week on Friday, 6 o'clock p.m.